Here's the great debate. Should you buy a Nissan 350Z or the newer 370Z? Let's just dissect these two amazing cars and just help you to decide which would be the best for you and for your project.
They both offer very, very different things, although they're based on a very similar platform and a very similar concept. So we'll present the facts as they are so you can make an informed decision as to which car is the better of these two. We're going to be comparing the performance figures, the overall package of the car, as well as the performance and its potential for upgrades.
So what's better, the Nissan 350Z or the Nissan 370Z? So they're both very, very similar cars. They appeal to the same market. The 370Z is newer, but does that mean it's better? I've seen lots of articles online comparing these two cars, and we're just going to take apart some of the arguments for each of the cars and look at the pros and cons of them and help you to choose the best car for you, for your project, and see which one makes the better project. So the 370Z is newer. So Nissan have come along and they've looked at all the criticisms they've had on the 350Z and they've addressed those and improved them and come out with a better car. So the 370Z is better. Well, actually it's certainly not that easy. You've got to look at so many different aspects to owning them. So we're going to compare different parts of the car, and depending on where your focus is and what your priorities are, it will influence your decision as to which you should go for. Because the 350Z is the older car, it's obviously cheaper to buy, and a lot of the articles that I've read online and even our own article implied that there's more parts around for the 350Z, but actually the 370Z has caught up now. So as that started to get old, the price difference in the used car market for an early 370Z or a late 350Z is very similar. So the cost advantage there and the availability of parts is no longer an argument. So we purely have to look at the cars on their own individual merits. So styling wise, the 370Z is better, it looks nicer, it's a more modern car after all. So Nissan, they've reworked a lovely design, so little details like the lights have been revised, but the interior just feels so much more modern and more plush. So if you were looking for a car to impress, the 370Z is clearly the one to go for out of the two. The 370Z feels more luxurious, more grown up, more of an executive car. The 370Z is also lighter, which enhances the handling, and although the top speed performance figures are very, very similar between the cars, the 370Z has a little bit more power and is a lighter overall package. So the early 350Z, the biggest criticism that ever received in the press and from drivers is its lack of power, and that's certainly something that Nissan have addressed when it came to knocking out a 350Z, and one of the priorities there was to give you more power. So the 350Z, or the Z33 as it's known among car enthusiasts, or even the Fair Lady Z if you're in the Japanese market, it's a two-door racing car. Nissan sought to resurrect the racing Z heritage of its past, and they certainly did a fantastic job when it came to producing the 350Z. It came in 5 trim options: the base trim, the enthusiast trim, the performance trim, the touring trim and the track trim, and the one you decide really depends on where your focus is in the car. Is it a track day car, or is it a more luxurious executive car,
or is it a fun weekend car where you're not too worried about comfort and you're focusing more on the performance it offers?
In the basic 350Z, Nissan have given you a choice, and it's a pretty good choice, and it's a tough choice to make. There were also some Nismo variants that came out, those very special tuned versions of the 350Z. You had the R-Tune, the S-Tune GT and the Nismo 350Z. All three of those were offered in different periods. Nismo certainly churned out some very impressive tuned models, and it really shows you what you can do to a 350Z, and we've got some videos coming up on tuning a 350Z and looking at what Nismo did to make the car great and how we can replicate that in our tuning efforts. So performance figure wise, the 350Z came with a V6 engine. It was a 3.5 litre engine and it delivered 306 horsepower, 268 pounds of torque. So at the time that was pretty impressive. It was a car that could go from 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds, and the Nismo version did the same thing in about 5.2 seconds. So So on its era, the Nissan 350Z was certainly very special when it came to pure performance. So now we look at the Nissan 370Z. So this was the natural successor to the 350Z. They took a working package and just looked to improve upon it. It was the last production vehicle that Nissan made that had a V6 engine, a manual transmission, and was naturally aspirated. So it's certainly set up to become a future classic just with that pedigree behind it. The 370Z was in production for 12 years, from 2008 to 2020. It came in 3 variants. There was the coupe variant, the roadster variant, and the Nismo variant. And all the 370Zs were offered with the same engine choice, the 3.7 litre V6, the VQ37VHR. But the horsepower and torque varied depending on the models. The North American version, for example, had 332 horsepower, and the UK version was down at 324 horsepower, and Nismo came along and knocked out a version that had 350 horsepower. So there's quite a bit of variation in the power outputs of the 370Z engines. And with the transmissions, you had a 6-speed manual transmission or a 7-speed automatic transmission with paddle shifters. So it actually felt like a really sporty car, and those paddle shifters work really, really well. So performance wise, the 370Z was a quarter mile time of 12.8 seconds. The 0 to 60 time was 4.5 seconds. So just getting in and driving a Nissan 350Z or a Nissan 370Z, how does it compare? What are the differences between the two? Well, the 370Z has the more powerful engine. It feels quicker, it feels faster, it corners better. The lighter weight, I think, adds a lot to the car and the way it performs. It's also sleeker, it's more agile. So again, the 370Z wins a few accolades over and above the 350Z. So when it comes to performance stats, I should flag out really that the early 350Z had a rather rubbish plenum on its intake. So replacing that can actually net you a little bit of a power gain. So that was one of the big design flaws, in my opinion, on the early 350Z, and it's certainly something they fixed on later models. We'll just flash up the different power levels between the two cars so you can actually compare them for yourself. So you've got from 276 horsepower in the VQ35DE up to 300 horsepower in the VQ35DE Rev Up version. There were quite a few limited edition models offered, and power certainly varied from region to region. So performance wise, the 370Z was a quarter mile time of 12.8 seconds. The 0 to 60 time was 4.5 seconds. So what are the pros and cons of the two cars? The 370Z, first of all, let's look at the pros. Better performance, it's better looking, it's a newer design, it's nicely equipped, it's relatively more comfortable, it's got a spacious trunk or boot area if you're in the UK, it's got better suspension, but it had a higher price. It still attracts a premium even on the used car markets. But again, as I said earlier, the older ones are now coming down in value and compare favourably with the better condition 350Zs, so the price shouldn't really come into it. So the pros of 350Z is that lower price, they're a lot more available. They still look pretty sleek and sporty. I don't think that car has aged. So often when you bring out a new version of the car, the old one automatically looks really old and staid and boring. That's not happened with the 350Z. So you're talking about a classic car there that's established, it's got a fan following, and there's always going to be people loving these, cherishing these, and looking after them. So the cons of the 350Z, we've said the performance is not quite there compared with the 370Z, but that's something you can fix. So I would say if you want a project car, something that's got maybe a higher mileage, that you're going to take the engine out and do some extensive work on it, the 350Z is the one to go for. There's a lot of experience out there when it comes to modifying the 350Zs, particularly the VQ35DE engine that came out. And also because it's an older car, you're looking to replace things. The suspension's become old. So you buy a 370Z and it's still going to be in relatively good condition. But the 350Z, you're now talking about a project. You've got bits on there that already need addressing. So straight away we can go out, we can buy performance parts and start bolting them on. The performance parts for the 350Z really are tried and tested. There's a lot of feedback and commentary out there as to how well these parts work, with people having a lot of experience with all the different options out there. So you can get a really good feel for what you're adding. With newer cars and newer suspension kits, that's not always the case. If it's brand new, there's generally not so much feedback and user reviews and not many companies have actually looked at them and rated them and tried them out and reported on them. So which should we go for? Well, personally, I would go for the 370Z. I want a car I can jump in. I haven't got time to mess around with the car anymore, so I want that complete package. The 350Z is a very good car. If you're looking for a project, I would say go for the 350Z as opposed to the 370. There's so many parts out there, and generally the parts are starting to get older on the car, so they will need replacing. So you're already looking at improving the car and enhancing it in as many ways as possible. So I hope this video has helped you to look at the options of these two stunning cars from Nissan, and hopefully it's helped you to choose between the two and given you a little bit of understanding as to what makes these models special. And we really look forward to hearing about your projects. So drop a comment as well, please. Let us know what you think about the 350Z, 370Z debate. We love hearing from our viewers and our readers on our website. So keep in touch, drop us a like, because that really helps us to get out there. And don't forget to stay tuned. So if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. And I will see you in the next video.